Good evening, everyone. Welcome you all in today's lecture. Today we have Professor Swadhin Sen amongst us. Professor Sen is an archaeologist in the Department of Archaeology, Jahangirnagar University, Savar, Dhaka, Bangladesh. Professor Sen completed his doctoral research under a co-directed program between Jahangirnagar University and University of Lyon 2, France. He has conducted archaeological surveying, excavation, and ethnographic studies in the northwestern part of Bangladesh for the last 20 years. For the last 3 years, he has also been working with the surveying and excavation team of the Regional Directorate of Archaeology, Khulna, and Barishal Division in the southwestern part of Bangladesh. He has published both in Bangla and English in various journals, newspapers, online portals, and blogs. His first book was published in Bangla on the dominating concepts and practice of nationalistic desires in archaeology of Bangladesh. Professor Sen had jointly edited with Professor Supriya Burma and Professor Bharbi Prasad Sahu the book From Routledge, The Archaeology of Early Medieval and Medieval South Asia, contesting narratives from the Eastern Ganga Brahmaputra Basin, essays in honor of Professor Brajlal Chattopadhyay. He is also working on two simultaneous projects on two books on survey reports in Dinajpur, Joypurhat region of southwestern Bangladesh and Bangla compilations of some of his papers. His area of interests are field of archaeology, theory and practice of archaeology, alluvial geoarchaeology, landscape archaeology, public archaeology, critical studies of heritage, materiality and cultural translation, water and rivers, oral narratives, and politics of the past. Professor Sen is speaking today on archaeology of the medieval and the settlement patterns and processes in Bangladesh, rethinking hegemonic discourses. We welcome you, sir. Over to you.
Thank you. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank especially the seminar committee of the Department of History, Delhi University, and especially my friend Professor Raziuddin Akil for inviting me for this lecture. And may I share my PPT? Okay.
Yes, sir.
You have disabled me. You have to enable me.
Ashu, kindly enable, sir.
Sir, it should be accessible to you now.
Okay. So first, I would like to thank again, and I will take this opportunity to dedicate my lecture to Professor Bharbi Prasad Sahu. That is, he is one of the most finest friend of me, and a wonderful friend, and we are really sad and shocked by his sudden demise. We were working together for a book project for last 4 or 5 years at least. So this is my humble dedication to his fond memories. So today, when I am talking about this medieval period, there might be a confusion among the listeners or among the scholars regarding the time frame. We have already debated long over this time frame, whether it is medieval, whether it is early medieval, especially in the context of Bangladesh. And you are all aware of the fact that in India, especially in Indian universities, there is long debate regarding the time frame, the nature, and the particular characteristics of these periodizing categories. I am not going into the detail into these debates, but rather I would like to point out that today I am going to talk about the medieval in the established sense, that is what is practiced in our universities in Bangladesh or in our public perception in Bangladesh. Medieval means that is from 13th century to 18th century. And sometimes it is also referred to as Sultanate period and Mughal period. Often these days it is referred to as sometimes in Mughal period, referred to as early modern period. Some people also refer to is the late part of this medieval period as the late medieval period. So there are different nomenclatures and there are different markers. And in the lecture today, I would like to point out some of the discrepancies and some of the problems with these periodizing categories, especially in Bangladesh, with regard to archaeological materials. And most of us already know that archaeology is dominantly perceived as a subdiscipline of history in South Asia. And often the archaeological data which are generated by the archaeologists are used or applied as a supplement to the historical narratives. By historical narratives, I am referring to the writings mostly based on textual and epigraphic sources, and sometimes it may refer to the numismatic sources also. So therefore, we tried as a team to go beyond these established, which I have referred to as hegemonic narratives of medieval period in Bangladesh, with the aid of systematically surveyed and excavated archaeological research in Bangladesh. And we are referring specially to the archaeology of settlement. And what do we mean by settlement in my lectures? Usually, settlement is usually termed as either urban or as rural. And usually, we always refer to the famous thesis of Gordon Childe about the characteristics of a urban settlement, which is also being questioned by many scholars from different disciplines. So, and we will also see in this through our research that Gordon Childe's thesis, even the ideas about the urban centers and rural centers can be problematized and questioned on the basis of archaeological data. So settlements, if we take account of the works of Brajodulal Chattopadhyaya, then we can find that settlements can not be confined only to the habitational space which is occupied by the human beings. Settlement also includes the agrarian area or agricultural fields, the forest, the area where there is pastoral activities, and often we these days include the empty spaces where we do not find any visible or detectable data or evidence of archaeological activity as part of the settlements, because settlement is a very broad and holistic term where human activity is related to many other factors and processes which determine the human activities. Rather, we can classify the settlements in different by different categories and by different terms if we talk about archaeology. And in archaeology, the other important factor is the consideration of scale, that is the spatial scale and the temporal scale. In contrast to history, archaeology may rely upon completely different idea of time and temporality. For example, in archaeological excavation, we emphasize on archaeological stratigraphy, where it is not necessarily time is delineated in reference to ancient, medieval, and modern, or in reference to, for example, Maurya period, Gupta period, or Pala period, or Sultanate period, or Mughal period, like this. In archaeology, we prefer or we do a periodization, but on the basis of the stratigraphy, which is the idea of the stratification of different deposits, layers, and different structures, both horizontally and vertically. So therefore, we sometimes refer to these periods as earlier than or later than the other periods and so. And in archaeological excavations in Bangladesh, that those we have conducted, and in also archaeological survey in Bangladesh, especially in the northwestern part, and also in the southwestern part, we are not finding this periodization corroborating to the historical periodization of early medieval, medieval, or medieval, late medieval, or something like that. So there is complete different understanding of time and space in archaeology and history. I am not saying that these ideas are not related, but they are related, they can be related, but as well as there are differences. And I must say that we have to acknowledge those differences. In this paper, that we have a very limited time, and I will show some sketchy and cursory understanding of what we are doing for the last 20 years at least. This understanding of medieval or our engagement with the medieval is not a very old phenomenon. Initially, we started with the early medieval period, that is 7th century CE to 13th century CE, that we refer to as early medieval. And then we found out that we cannot confine ourselves only into the early medieval, especially when we encounter archaeological data on the field. During archaeological excavation, we are finding the use of the early medieval places in the so-called medieval period. We are finding horizontal or vertical resemblance and mixing of early medieval and medieval. Therefore, we had to engage with the medieval period in archaeological terms, and that was not our choice. We didn't select it. You all know that in scholarship of, for example, in India, the field is very specialized. Some people are referred to as the experts on early medieval period or ancient period. Some people are referred to as the experts of medieval period. Some people are experts on epigraphy. Some people are experts on numismatics. So there are different fields of expertise. And interestingly, if we try to engage with the archaeological data in the field, especially on the field, then we can seek help from, for example, from the epigraphist or from the numismatics. But as a whole, we have to have some kind of understanding of the entire assemblage of archaeological material or archaeological data that we are referring to. And in this case, I must point to the fact that in archaeology also, there is some understanding which is very important, especially for Bangladesh, and I think also for the other parts of India. For example, we call it formation process of archaeological record. And when Bangladesh, as you know it, that it is a land of rivers, and many river changes their dynamics, their course, and in the monsoon period, there are lots of rainfall, and the rainfall in the Himalayan piedmont zone, especially in the Assam, Meghalaya, or that area, which is in northeastern part of India, is drained through the Bengal basin. That is where Bangladesh is currently situated. So these rains, these rivers, and this complete shifting of this landscape is very important for the understanding of the settlements and understanding of the history and archaeology of that region. And somehow or other, these entire ideas of the landscape and the climate is not very well addressed in the dominant or hegemonic discourses. We can see some sporadic findings, mainly the collaboration of climate and monsoon and the landscape with the textual sources. For example, I may refer to the recent work by Pratyay Nath on the relationship of Mughal warfare with the climatic conditions. And he also referred to these climatic conditions, flood and rainfall of Bangladesh as a very determining phenomena. And in archaeology, we also give importance to the what we call discard, reuse, and redeposition. And I will show you with some photographs that why it is very important for understanding the way we understand the periods. So there are more importance on the relative dating in our world because we don't have enough money or funding to do chronometric datings like radiocarbon dating and all the other things. And there are also some problems regarding the archaeology of both early medieval and medieval. Rather, I should say the archaeology of the historical period in India, that we have a certain kind of reverence or uncritical acceptance of what is called scientific data. If some scientific techniques are applied for any data, for example, someone is doing some isotopic analysis, or someone doing some kind of X-ray diffraction analysis of something, or someone even doing this dating, radiocarbon dating, or any kind of dating. We have to know that no scientific method is foolproof. And even dating, what is conventionally known as absolute dating, are not absolute at all. And radiocarbon dating is not absolute, and we have to calibrate it to get the calendar ages. So these things have to be kept in mind in understanding my analysis today. And this is the this is Bangladesh, Bengal, in relation to the other parts of the subcontinent, for example, in Bihar, UP, Orissa, and others. And you may see that I am using, I think, annotations, the spotlight. So this area, as I was referring to, is the part or space where mainly it is dominated by three rivers. One is the Brahmaputra River, that is coming down from Himalayan part to crossing the Assam and then get into Bangladesh. And in Bangladesh, the Brahmaputra is known as Jamuna. And there is a river called Brahmaputra, which is the earlier course of Brahmaputra. And another river is Padma, Padda River, which is the part of Ganges River, and it is known in Bangladesh as Padda River. And these two rivers and several other rivers from the northeastern part join with the Padda and Jamuna River, and they make Meghna River. So then you will see the Bay of Bengal region. So this is Bangladesh, and I have also referred to some of the names of the sub-regions, which is referred to as especially in the early medieval period, and some of them continued even in the earlier part of the medieval period. For example, I will talk about the northwestern part. A large part of the northwestern part was known as Pundra or Borendri in the early medieval period. And some part was also included in the Kamrupa Pragjyotissa region, which was later also included in several smaller kingdoms in after 13th, 14th, 15th century. And the other part I will be referring to in the coastal area or the tidal zone area of Bangladesh. And I would like to thank two of my former students. Now they are both of them are regional directors of the Government Department of Archaeology, Bangladesh, Afroza Khan Mita and AKM Saifur Rahman. They have permitted me to include me as an advisor to their work since last 3 or 4 years in this zone, which was under the Banga region, and it is also the location where the famous mangrove forest of world, the Sundarbans, are located just here. So this is the satellite images of the zone, and you will see the rivers, the greeneries, the Sundarbans in this part, and also the surrounding areas. On one side, it is the Himalayas, the eastern part, it is the extended part of the Himalayan range, and the western part, some western part is also identified as the Chotanagpur Plateau, which is covering, you all know, that part of Bihar, Jharkhand, and that Chhattisgarh region. And I will be referring to this part mainly. I'm not sure what is happening. Okay. I will mostly referring to this part, and in the end of my lecture, I will refer to some of the archaeological data and the idea of settlement in this coastal and tidal zone. We have picked mainly an area which is known as Ghoraghat. Ghora means, you must have known that it is horse, and Ghat means a land of landing stage on the bank of the river. So some historians often think that Ghoraghat was a trading center, mostly where the trading of the horses took place, especially in the medieval period. And Ghoraghat is also located, if we see, Ghoraghat is also located, this is Ghoraghat. Ghoraghat is also located in the area where it is close, very close to another urban center, which is, let me show you. Ghoraghat, this area is also located close to the urban center of Punjab, that is Mahastangad, which is the urban center since early historic period, since Mauryan times. And it is also, we can you can show these, see this Gaur and Pandua. Gaur was a famous urban center during the Sultanate period, and Pandua was also an urban center in Sultanate period. And mainly, this area is close to Mahastangad, which was an urban center since early historic period to 13th century. And according to the archaeological stratigraphy analyzed by the team combining joint mission of that is Bangladesh and France, they have also suggested that they are finding archaeological data since 18th century in Mahastangad. In this particular context, and we'll see the Coach Bihar of area of Assam, and also Coach Bihar and Assam, India, and at the same time here is Jalpaiguri and all the other places. And the West Bengal part, we will also see the different parts of the West Bengal. For example, this is South Dinajpur district, and this is North Dinajpur district. And another smaller urban center is located in the Bangalore of South Dinajpur district of West Bengal. So in this space bounded by these urban centers, we are working in this area since a long time. Today, I will be referring to this area specially, and also some sites of this area. So here we are finding, if we just show you some photographs, we are finding different kinds of settlements according to our categorization. For example, Ghoraghat, if we just take some reference to the historical sources, then briefly I can say that most historians identify present Ghoraghat and its archaeological ruins at Barsaul or Barsauli. Though there is not a single mention of the such toponym in Tabakati Nasiri by Minhaj Shiraz. There is not a single place name that correspond philologically or phonetically to this name. This place name, they assume, is also related to Badauni's reference to Narnaul or Narnauli in Muntaka-be-Tawarikh, composed on around 1594. And Tabaqati Nasiri was completed in around 1260 Common Era, though the beginning of the composition is not certain. Minhaji Shiraz witnessed many events in the Indian subcontinent after 1226 to 27 Common Era. The narration of the events before that date were recorded from other sources. This place name in Tabaqat has not a single philological corroboration in the entire Dinaspur, Gaibandha, Joypurhat, or Bogra district of Bangladesh. That is the present area which I am referring to. And we have gone through the village names or database of village names. We haven't found any name that corresponds to the place name referred to in Minhaj's description or Minhaj's narrative. And the Barsauli, Barsauli, whatever is referred to, name was first occurred in Tabaqati Akbari, placed the date of this text to 1593 CE. Barsala as a mahal of another mahal, town of Nusratabad, was referred to as one of the 84 mahals under Sarkar of Ghoraghat of Suba of Bangla in Aini Akbari. The date of the completion of Aini Akbari has been ascribed to by Professor Musavi, Sirin Musbi, to circa 1598. Though she analyzed the temporal frame of the data collection and suggested that Abul Fazl Allami began the collection of data before 1588 to 1899. So we need to investigate the discrepancies among various sources and their temporal framework, which have often been used to correlate quite uncritically and anachronistically with the medieval Ghoraghat and the study area as a whole. There is no philological or phonological corroboration of the place names such as Narkoti, Narankoi, Narnaul, used by Badauni text, and Narangoi, Barkoni. So many different names have been suggested for the medieval or Sultanate names of the Ghoraghat. Despite the absence of any corroboration, Barsala or Barsaul or even Nusratabad are also recognized as the early place names of Ghoraghat. A.K.M. Zakaria, one of the foremost archaeologists from Bangladesh, has rightly pointed out that it is not clear where Nizamuddin Ahmed got the name Barsaul. He is also one of the scholars. And Zakaria has also pointed to the fact that the watershed moment, which has been referred to as the marker between the early medieval and medieval period, in reference to the the expedition of Ikhtiaruddin bin Bakhtiar Kholji to Tibet or to Kamrup as very important. And he also problematized, A.K.M. Zakaria has also problematized the route the Bakhtiar Kholji has followed. And he suggested that Bakhtiar Kholji follows the route from this northwestern part of Bangladesh. In contrast to the propositions made by, for example, Nurinikanto Bhattashali as an major revertee. And I must refer to the introduction section of the Bengali translation of A.K.M. Zakaria of Tabaqati Nasiri, which is very good, as Zakaria has taken into consideration many natural and archaeological material of that particular region to understand the expedition of Ikhtiaruddin Muhammad bin Bakhtiar Khalji. And he tried to contextualize some part of the Tabaqati Nasiri through his understanding of the area. So in Ghoraghat, we are finding different kind of evidences, archaeological evidences. For example, if I may refer to, for example, I have completed a chart. Excuse me. This is, it is not possible to show in PowerPoint. These are some of the textual, epigraphic, as well as other sources which have been found in the study area in and around Ghoraghat. For example, there were five copper plate inscriptions found from this area, and for example, two stone slab inscriptions of Alauddin Hussain Shah was found from this area. One stone slab inscription was found from the 11th, 12th century from this area. And this place is also referred to in Ain-e Akbari. It is also referred to in a manuscript by name Safan Nama by Abdul Latif. And there is a very famous hagiography which is not translated completely in English of the Shah Ismail Ghazi, and his Mazar, or his Mazars, I would say, are located in this area. And the name of the hagiography is Risalati Suhada. And this place is also referred to in the Baharistani Gaibi, the famous text from 17th century by Mirza Nathan. So if we see these textual and epigraphic evidences, then it is very difficult to correlate all these data with the actual archaeological data of the region. For example, if we see this, some of the archaeological sites, this is the Ghoraghat fort, which is known as, we call it Durgo in Bengali. And you will see the different types of archaeological data or archaeological material which we found during our survey. And this is not only monuments or monumental remains. I must point to the fact. So this is some kind of Mazar, and interestingly, there are so many Mazars with so many names. Not necessarily these Mazars belong to some particular saint or priest. For example, this Mazar is known as Chowkidarin Mazar. So there is a tradition in Bengal, particularly in Bangladesh. I am not sure about the other parts of India, but I have seen some of this tradition in the Bihar region, that many places, old places, are identified and imagined as a place of the with sacred values, and they are referred to as Mazars or Dargahs. And this is a phenomena which cannot be dated precisely. So this is a mosque within the Ghoraghat fort, and if you think of fort in terms of North India or in terms of Western India, then we will be completely lost in Bangladesh, because most of the fort or killa that we referred to in Bangladesh are basically mud forts, the mud built walls, like this one, mud built walls, and you will see this mud built wall, and there is another place which is perceived as a dargah, and you will see certain scatters of archaeological material on the surface. And this is a river which is now dead, locally known as Mainda River, and it was used as a moat for the Ghoraghat fort. And these are all mud walls, and these mud-built forts are also referred to in Baharistani Gaibi, but there are differences in sizes, shapes, and also the spatial pattern or locations of these mud-built forts, not only in this area, but also in the other areas of the northwestern part and in the southwestern part. So mud fort or mud-built kellas are very important aspects of the archaeological material or archaeological data of Bangladesh. And in medieval period, we are getting many mud forts, smaller mud forts, which was particularly built during the 15th, 16th, or 17th centuries in this entire northwestern area. And we cannot date it precisely. And there are also mud forts, or especially large mud forts, which were built during 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th century in this entire area. For example, Mahastangor, the earlier, it is built with the fortification, brick built fortification, but earlier, the earliest fortification wall was mud built. So this is another very interesting mud fort, this Nildoria or Nilamborer Gor. Nilambor is supposed to be one king belonging to the one dynasty of the Assam, and people associate whether it was Nilambor or not, the Nilambor with this fort, but this fort belonged to the early medieval period, but it continued to be used in the medieval period. And this fort is basically, I will show them in the maps, that it is basically oval shaped. And this fort or the Kella was surrounded by a large moat, and then it was surrounded by consecutive mud-built embankments because it is located on the floodplain. And this fort was continued to be used in the medieval period with certain kind of modifications. And you will see different kinds of mazars I was referring to. And all these mazars are not necessarily, you will find some kind of material remains. For example, this is a mazar belonging to Shah Ismail Ghazi. And all these mazars are referred to as the Mazar of Shah Ismail Ghazi. There are at least 7 places which are referred to as Mazar of Shah Ismail Ghazi. So Shah Ismail Ghazi is a very popular imaginary figure in the local perception or popular understanding of the sacredness of the area. And interestingly, this Mazar is built upon a mound, structural mound, which possibly belonged to the early medieval period. And this Mazar was built upon it. And we'll find this kind of phenomena in other places also, where the earlier structures or earlier places that is belonging to the early medieval period are being reused in different form in the medieval period, in Sultanate period or in Mughal period. So this this especially, I would like to mention this one. In Bangladesh, there are many lowland or wetlands which are particularly flooded during the monsoon, and in winter season they are cultivated. And this is a very small highland within a very big wetland. We call it Bil, and there is no material cultural remains in this entire mound. And still, this mound is referred to as the Mazar of Shah Ismail Ghazi, without any material cultural traces. So we have to rethink, we can rethink the idea of material culture also in terms of the past. These are mazars, and you will see the reuse of the earlier materials in different kinds of medieval settlements. And this is a famous mosque and government protected mosque, Suba Mosque, we known as. It was built on around 15th, 16th century. And you will also see the reuse of the earlier material or early, possibly the early medieval structure and stones here and there. I will also mention to these stoneworks, which are very prevalent in the area. And this is a pond or tank, which is very, very special for our study in the area, because we are taking tanks or old ponds at a very important archaeological marker or archaeological site. And you will see on the bank of this tank, you will see this layer of charcoal and ash. This is reused, but still you can find a huge, long and thick layer of charcoal and ash. And this suggests that the continuous reuse of this entire area. And these are some of the mosque or dilapidated mosque belonging to mainly belonging to 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries. These are tanks. I was referring to the tanks. Now I come to the analysis of this area. We are talking about this area, and you will see this Ghoraghat is located on the bank of a river which is known as Korotwa River. And I was mentioning one oval-shaped fortified area. This is located here, and you can see this entire archaeological settlements are located on the floodplains. That is, they are regularly flooded during the monsoon and during the peak monsoon season. And this area, these flags refer to the places from where we have found these inscriptions. I'm sorry. Okay. And you can see I have identified the cluster of settlements, and this area might be identified as the urban center of Ghoraghat. In our hegemonic narratives, Ghoraghat is identified as the urban center, but we haven't found any indication or any archaeological material on the basis of which we can support the parameters of urban settlement for this entire area. And interestingly, we have also found archaeologically many ditches, the cut like canals, and these ditches are covering the core area of the Ghoraghat. And there are several other fortified areas like Boro Paiker Gor and Raghunathpur Gor and some other gors. The gors are basically Kella or the high part of the area. Therefore, we are finding different clustering of settlements in the area, and these gray areas referred to as settlements, and they also belong to the floodplain area and the Barinth terrace area, which belongs to upper land with red soil, and it is dated to the Pleistocene period. So the distribution and density of the settlements refer to the juxtaposition or overlapping of the settlements of early medieval and medieval period. And even if we excavate, we are not finding clear separation. That is clear separation on the basis of material culture that can differentiate between early medieval and medieval. For example, what are the main parameters of differentiating early medieval and medieval in Bangladesh? For example, we refer to, for example, the change of the religious identity of the rulers, change in the, for example, polity or revenue collection system, change in the, for example, monument building activities, mosques and other kind of monuments were being built, and also introduction of the metallic currency, especially in this part, because in the early medieval period, we are not getting any kind of metallic currency in this part. And historians usually refer to this introduction of metallic currency as an indicator of trade and commerce, and also as an indicator of the building of new urban centers in this medieval period. But we do not have any archaeological attestations to all these claims, because in Ghoraghat we are finding clusters of archaeological sites, clusters of different kind of archaeological sites, and in close to Ghoraghat we are finding other clusters of archaeological sites in the Govindganj. For example, in the second map you will see. So you cannot really separate the urban zone from the rural zone in the Ghoraghat region. And you will see this, somehow these slides are moving automatically. I am sorry for that. This is the interesting site that I was referring to, a ovaloid settlement, and this is surrounded by concentric embankments, and there are many embankments in the eastern part of the Korotwa River. And according to our hypothesis, we think that this Korotwa River was not flowing exactly from the same place even during the 14th, 15th century. And it was continuously changing its courses. And in that sense, what is now looks like a separate entity in terms of the settlements of Ghoraghat might be completely related to the settlements of Ghoraghat. And this is the Ghoraghat fort, which is on the, this is Boro Paiker Gor, and these are other fortified areas. So there are many fortified areas which is destroyed and which cannot be identified, but still the fortified areas are closely associated with the habitational areas in this area. The habitational areas are marked by moats and ditches. We don't know, we have no idea what was the function of the ditches till now, but this particular phenomena of ditches and the crisscross type of intersected canals are mainly found in this particular area. We are not getting in the northern part of the region. And this is the entire area. On the right side of your screen, you will see this is Mohsangad, and this is the area I have marked the Korotwa River. And this Korotwa River shifted the changing courses of Korotova River have been just mentioned or located in this map. So you will see the distribution of settlements in the northern part of Mahastangad. I must confess that we haven't yet done any systematic survey in this area. We hope to do so in future. But on the basis of this area, we must say that it is very difficult to delineate or differentiate between urban and rural. Because for the urban settlements, one of the most important criteria is the, for example, size of the settlement. Another criteria is the fortification. Another criteria is the large monumental architecture. So all these are not at all present in the sense the theories of urbanism puts it. Mahastangad can be identified as an urban center, but Ghoraghat, which could be a semi-urban place, is larger than Mahastangad, the entire area. We are finding rural settlements which are just surrounded by ponds or tanks. You can see these settlements. These dots are referred to the tanks. These are all old tanks. Either they belong to the early medieval period or to the medieval period. And some of the tanks were being reused even during medieval period. And we are finding reference to these tanks even in the colonial survey reports. So these tanks are a very special phenomena for understanding these settlements and their reuse and continuous reuse in this southwestern part of Bangladesh, especially in this zone. Therefore, and this is the another area to the north of this area we have shown, and you have seen we are talking about this area till now. Now we are talking about this area. This area more close to the Jalpaiguri region of West Bengal, and also more close to the Coach Bihar region and the Assam region of India. And this is also geologically different. We know we can identify it as Tista alluvial fan. And we are finding, for example, look at this settlement. This is a huge fort known as Bhitorgarh. It covers both Bangladesh and India. And there are concentric walls made of both mud and brick. And this is identified as an archaeologist by the largest urban center of Bengal. We are not very sure about this kind of identification. Yet, this is a very, very interesting fortified area or wall settlement. And its location is very important because it is in the transitional zone between Barendri and the Kamrupa Pragjyotish area. And it is also located in an area which is close to the Trans-Himalayan trade routes. So these areas, these forts are continuously used in the medieval period, even to the colonial period. Some of the forts or some of these mud walls are being used even in the 18th, 19th century. Possibly the pattern of use are being changed. Possibly the space is being changing, but we are finding a continuity of these spaces as settlements. And this is a very interesting example of earthquake, the evidence of earthquake. Here one temple was possibly destroyed by an earthquake. We have dated this earthquake to the middle of the 13th century, and then it was covered and it was reused. And we are not sure whether it was reused as a temple space or like many other sites. We are seeing that, for example, this one. This was the temple. After the earthquake, the entire space was covered, and then another floor was built. And we are not sure whether this floor was built with the same purpose and with the same sacred identity. This is another site in this northernmost part of Bangladesh that we have excavated. Here we are seeing a Buddhist temple is being converted into a Brahmanical temple, and then again it was reused as an habitational site during the medieval period. So this continuity of reuse and changes force us to rethink the way we understand the medieval and early medieval and the difference between the medieval and early medieval. This is the zone which is close to the Tista and Brahmaputra River. And here we are finding comparatively less archaeological materials, probably because of the fact that this is more dynamic as a landscape than the western part of Bangladesh. You all know, possibly all know, that Brahmaputra River has a tendency to shift from west to east. And geologists have suggested that it is shifting or changing its course different times and different periods. We have historical records of this shift in 18th, 19th century. But in this area, you will see there are a mix-up of medieval and early medieval. We are finding small three-domed mosques, which are dilapidated brick-built mosques. We are finding embankments, and we are also finding mud fortified area, which is, for example, one is known as Dharmapalgarh. This Dharmapal is not necessarily the Pala ruler Dharmapal. These Dharmapal could be the Dharmapala of the Pala dynasties of Kamrup Pragjyotisha region. So in that sense, this entire area was a transformative zone between the Kamrup Assam area, and later it is during the Ahom period, it is also a space of continuous struggle where Mughal domain, Mughal rulers were fighting against the different dynasties of the Ahom rulers. So this area, for example, close to the Tista and Brahmaputra area, are another space of the settlement, and these settlements are a little bit different from the area we were referring to earlier. Here, the settlements are more dispersed, not like dense, as we have mentioned earlier, but we are finding settlements at buried sites, fortified areas, but they are associated with the chains of the rivers, and they are also being reused. And interestingly, the mosques we are finding here mostly belong to the 17th, 18th century, and some of the mosques are also 19th century period. So in that sense, I have come to the end of our discussion. This is basically the coastal part of Bangladesh, and in the dominant or hegemonic narratives, for example, I have mentioned earlier several times that, for example, we referred to the phenomenal work of Professor Richard Eaton regarding the Islamization and the expansion of settlements in Bangladesh or in Bengal, and he has emphasized the expansion of settlements in this area, the southwest part of this delta, as an area where Islam expanded not with the sword, but in his word, with the plow. That is, agrarian expansion activity of the Sufi saints just combined together, and the forest of this area was cleared or reclaimed, and then new kind of settlements were built, and those settlements were built, and the tribals or the lower strata society, people of the society, was converted into Islam. This is the thesis that he suggested or proposed in his famous book on this rise of Islam in the Bengal frontier. He has continued with this thesis, and recently he has published 2 articles. One is in the Asiatic Society volume of medieval period Bangladesh. Here he also mentioned this idea of his thesis of 3 frontiers: political, religious, and agrarian frontier. And he has mentioned that in this area, in the deltaic part, Islam was expanded through the reclamation of land by cutting or clearing of forest, cultivation of the wet rice, and activities of the pig. But we have found several archaeological evidence and many kinds of archaeological material which problematizes or questions his assumptions. For example, these are the archaeological sites in the deltic part, and many of these archaeological sites were constructed during the early medieval period, before the coming of the Turks and Afghans in Bengal. And recently, the Regional Directorate of Archaeology have conducted survey and excavations in this area, and they have found very interesting evidence. For example, these are the sites which belong to the early medieval and both medieval period. And these are the cowrie shells which were found in one of the settlements. And these are, you can see the stoneworks and one of the unfinished stone images. And this site is located just close to the Sundarban, close to the Bay of Bengal. You can see different kinds of archaeological material and this landscape with rivers, forest, and alluvial terrain. Just to show two of the sites, they have discovered, the Regional Directorate of Archaeology have discovered, and the copyright of these images belong to them. They have discovered one Buddhist vihara, and this Buddhist vihara, you can see the stratigraphy, was used also in the medieval period. And interestingly, you can find the finding of charred rice grains just below these early medieval structures. So these charred rice grains attest to the fact that wheat rice was being cultivated in the delta even before the coming of the Afghan and Turks. And he referred, Professor Eaton referred to the fact that probably the intensity of rice cultivation increased after the coming of the Turks and Afghans. But we are almost certain by the recent findings of the Government Department of Archaeology and by some earlier works that rice was cultivated, not necessarily wet rice. Wet rice is a very problematic category. Different kinds of rice and species of rice were being cultivated in the entire area, which is tidal, which is dynamic, and which is continuously changing. And people were adapting to the changing environment, and they were cultivating the rice. And the notion of reclamation of forest is also problematic because there are different notion of forest or jungle in the Bangladesh area. The mangrove forest of Sundarban cannot be equated with the forest in the northwestern part or forest in the Sylhet region. So this is one of the Buddhist monasteries that they have found, and that belong to 9th, 10th century, the earlier than the coming of the Turks and Afghans. And these are some of the photos. This is another small Buddhist temple that they have excavated, Regional Directorate of Archaeology. And you can see the stratigraphy, you can see the reuse of these settlements even during the late medieval period. This is we call cellular architecture, and we are not sure, and the excavators are also not sure whether this entire edifice were used in the medieval period in the same manner. These are potteries I have just included just to show you. And this is a sign of possible sign of an earthquake on the wall of the temple. And this is another famous settlement, medieval settlement, which have been referred to by Professor Eaton and also by many people. This is a world archaeological site. This mosque is known as Shotgumbus Mosque, and it is known as Khalifatabad. It was a mint town, and we are finding evidences of coins which has referred to Khalifatabad as a mint town. And there is another settlement just towards the north of this Khalifatabad, which is also known as Barobazar or Mahmudabad. They have also excavated an habitational site in this area, and possibly, I am not sure, but I can claim that none of the habitational site belonging to medieval period has ever been excavated in the Bengal area. There have been archaeological work in the Gaur urban center by some of our friends, but it is a very different habitational zone. And this is the Khalifatabad area, and you can see the Bhairab River with yet paleo courses. And these are mainly mosques and deposits. And also there is an interesting long road made of brick and covering possibly the entire area. This is the Mazar of Khan Jahan Ali, in the name of which the site is known or famous. And Khan Jahan Ali is also considered as a saint or Sufi who had reclaimed the forest and converted the land into agrarian land. And he belonged to the end. Interestingly, look at the stratigraphy. You can find even the early Sultanate period and possibly the pre-Sultanate period habitation or materials in the site, and then it continued up to late medieval period, and it went through different kinds of changes. So the notion, the idea that Khalifatabad was established only during the lifetime of Khan Jahan Ali might be wrong, and it can be in an habitational space earlier than him. He possibly converted it into more wide and more broad settlement. And here is also, if we consider it as an urban center or urban settlement, that we are not getting any similarity with the urban centers like Mahastangad or the urban settlements that has been referred to in the text. The parameters are not present in this urban center, neither is in Barobajar. And lastly, I will show you some of the most interesting sites from the Sundarban area. And Professor Eaton has not mentioned this site because these sites were not there at the time he wrote his books and his articles. These are located in the mangrove forest of Sundarban. And no one can imagine that people could have lived in the mangrove forest of Sundarban because it is highly dynamic. There are forests, and most of the forests are underwater during the tidal period. And some of these, for example, this is just exposed in the river bed. And we don't know about the nature of this structure, but it was in the under the land. But because of the erosion in the coastal area, this is exposed. And now these structures is only exposed for half an hour per day. So it is very difficult to work there also. And these are the potteries, and in the Sundarban forest area, you are finding structural mounds that suggesting the early medieval, that is 9th, 10th century, and afterwards, people were inhabiting this area, irrespective of the thesis of Professor Richard Eaton. So these are all within the urban center, and I will finish this lecture with the photo of this salt making kilns. Interestingly, some of our friends from America are now working on those kilns, and they have published one article on those kilns, and they have dated some kilns, and they have suggested that some of these kilns were used even during 8th, 9th century CE. And this salt making industry in this coastal part continued even in the medieval and late medieval period. And even these days, in the current days, people are making salt from the water, salty water, and also from the salty land, salty earth, by using this kind of kilns. And they have suggested some chronological differentiation in the shape of the kilns. So what I would like to suggest is that our idea about the medieval settlements or the medieval can be completely questioned and can be problematized by archaeological data. And if we take into consideration of archaeological data in the way we are not usually do, and if we take initiative to do more systematic and more scientific surveying and excavations, then some of the hegemonic discourses regarding, for example, the parameters or the watershed moments between early medieval, or the parameters of the medieval period can be found very simplistic or homogeneous. And even I can finish with the notion of the metallic currency. And for example, I was reading one very good article by Professor Doyle, And he has mentioned that there is no possible reason to consider metallic currency as a marker of extended trade and commerce. So what I wanted to show that we can raise different questions. We can understand the medieval period differently if we just go beyond the monuments and we can go beyond the text. Of course, texts are important. We can corroborate the textual evidences with these archaeological evidences. Thank you for your patience and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening and edifying lecture. Now I request Raji sir to give comments on Professor Sen's talk. That will be followed by a question and answer session.
This was a fine presentation by Professor Swadhin Sen. I can't see him because the screen is still on.
I am stopping.
Yeah. So very interesting indeed. And before I can say something, I just noticed our colleague Professor Parul Pandyadhar has welcomed you with some comments and some questions, which I think Abhishek can read out so that we can hear, and then we can carry forward from there.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
So ma'am wrote, thank you, professors.
If you like, I can read it.
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
Okay. So thank you very much, Swadhin Sen, Professor Sen, for your presentation of the complexities surrounding the creation of boundaries between the early medieval and the medieval. This is, of course, refreshingly based on new empirical archaeological documentation and analysis. So we congratulate you for it. It was really enlightening. And it serves to emphasize some important continuities from the early medieval to the medieval, something that a lot of us also are thinking and discussing. So it's very useful to hear this kind of solid work. You've demonstrated complex relationships between textual and archaeological records, new discoveries, also revelations of the processes of reuse, what we learn from reuse. So my question is really about, it's a micro question based on the reuse material, data that you showed. And I'm especially interested in the Bishnupur mound, Dinajpur. What are the discoveries precisely there that have made it possible for you to reveal reuse from a Buddhist to a Brahminical structure?
Okay.
Yeah.
This is I have just referred to only Bishnupur mound. In the Bishnupur mound, for example, the earliest structure was Buddhist, affiliated to Buddhists on the basis of the pottery and on the basis of the architectural layout. It is clear that it was a Buddhist structure. Probably the central stupa of the structure, which is enclosed by the with Ratha projection laid foundation. This is enclosure wall, and the central stupa was possibly destroyed, or it could be natural or it could be anthropogenic. And on the central stupa, the later Saptaratha temple was built. And we have also found the foundation part or the base part of the stupa. These stupas are usually referred to as votive stupas, smaller stupas. But in another site, which is very close to the Bishnupur site, we have found several stupas or bases of stupas, which are not votive stupas, which contain the crematorial remains with ash and charcoal in their cores. So we have found stratigraphically associated smaller stupas and other sculptural evidences, terracotta plaques, which suggest that the earliest structure was Buddhist. And later the Saptaratha temple and the other podiums and some of the sculptural remains, which are very fragmented and possibly fragmented by the Anthropogenic activity, that was Brahmonical. And the Brahmonical was possibly destroyed by an earthquake. And then the area was occupied during the medieval period, for example, in 14th, 15th or later, for habitational activities. And there is also a Mazar just close to the site. And we have also found buried remains of walls or remains of walls belonging to earlier period under the area associated with the Mazar. So this is the parameters or the evidences on the basis of which we are saying that this Buddhist edifice was converted into a Brahmonical one, then it was reused in the later time during early medieval time. And for your note, in most of the structural mounds where we have excavated almost 14 structural mounds, except one, which is a Buddhist monastery. We have found evidence of reuse of the same edifice, stratigraphic evidence of the same reuse in all the archaeological sites. And sometimes we are very confused about the later period floors and deposit, but we are not sure about the uses because there is no associated material which can be identified to understand the nature of the site at that point. Therefore, sometimes we do not refer to any site as Brahmonical or Buddhist because which was initiated as a Brahmonical temple might be used later as for some secular purpose and later for some another religious purpose. And we have clear indication, stratigraphic indications of this kind of reuse. I hope I could answer your question.
Yeah, thank you so much.
If anyone wants to ask question, then kindly raise your hand. And
so let me then add to this conversation that on the basis of the archaeological research and the material that you are unearthing, different levels, certainly, your research and the team that you are working with is, creating a very, very interesting proposition with regard to how periodization has to be rethought. And we are continuously rethinking. It would appear that, historians working with textual material and epic, inscriptions, etc., have sort of dominated the scene. But archaeologists and the research of the kind that you are doing, and we have scholars working with art historical material here, our friend Parul. So now with the archaeologists and art historical practitioners and those who work with conventional sources for the writing of history, if they can work together to actually rethink periodization, we are going into and heading into some very interesting proposition. We are no longer from the 19th century into Hindu, Muslim, British business. We are also uncomfortable now with ancient, medieval, modern categorization. That's why we have early medieval and early modern. Now, so where does medieval actually eventually stops? So previously you were thinking in terms of 7th to 13th, 12th, 13th century for the early medieval and 13th, 14th, 15th century medieval proper, but from the kind of examples that you are coming up, maybe 16th century remains medieval for Bengal, and isn't it? And if at all Bengal is to be seen as part of the global, international global early modern history, then basically 17th, 18th century is the early modern, and which is different also once again from the colonial modern of the 19th century, because 18th century and 19th century are not the same. So now proper colonial regime has come, taken shape, and therefore, as Parthacharji has made that distinction of early modern with colonial modern, so we are actually heading into a more sophisticated view of the, characterization of clusters of centuries on the basis of these material evidence of the kind that you are coming up, or of the kind, those who work with connected history. So connected history of the early medieval period and connected history of the early modern period actually is confronting conventional traditional view, which was based on the textual material, you know. And the textual material of the kind that you mentioned, from Minhajus Siraj's Tabaqat Nasri to or the 13th century work, 16th century works of Muntakhab al-Tawarikh by Badayuni or Nizamuddin Ahmad's Tabaqat al-Bari. These were actually not helping much in terms of identification of places, especially places that you are looking for. Ain Akbari you mentioned is perhaps useful, but it's still not helping beyond a point. But Badayuni certainly will not. Badayuni did not have a sense of geography for Eastern India.
And Abul Fazl, with all due respect, Abul Fazl did not come to Bengal, as far as I know.
Yes, so it will have a long view. See, North Indians do not have proper understanding of Bengal, and here you are talking about further east into Bengal Delta. So there will be a problematic. I was just remembering Badayuni mentioning how, when under Humayun, the Afghans were fighting and the Afghan forces were defeated. And one of the sons of Ibrahim Lodi actually fled towards Odisha, which was Jajnagar. And then he would say that he fled towards east to Odisha. And then he doesn't know where is Odisha actually and what is Odisha. Then he says it is the frontier of the desert of non-existence. Adam. There no one exists. So the North Indian view of the geography and this kind of a specificity that you are unearthing becomes a problematic. That becomes a problematic also for the long view of the kind, say, Richard Eaton was looking at. So certainly there will be problems when you actually pinpoint and locate particular sites and see what was happening at that particular site, and how this information culled from the site is not going to help us beyond a point in terms of the larger thesis.
Even there are very discernible differences between different regions of Bangladesh. For example, I was referring to two different regions.
Yes.
Northwest and Southwest.
Yes.
We cannot just corroborate them together or find their relationship only on the basis of the resemblance.
Yes.
There are many differences. And you are talking about this connectivity. And for example, I was just thinking about this production of salt. And salt as a trade item. And the trade of cowries. And the cowries and rice, which are continuing since 7th, 8th century. So the thesis of Professor Richard Eaton, which is very popular, and in fact, whichever book I read on Bengal, you have the reference of that book. I have enormous respect for Professor Eaton, but still I think that he should revise some of his thinking, even he's more than 80 years old.
So even on this question also of Eaton referring to 13th, 14th, 15th century as not so much important as the late 16th century developments and imagination thinking about the 13th century, and then saying 13th century is not important. This is a problematic, because the sites of mosques and mazars, etc., that we are showing not only from the 13th century but prior to 13th century also they exist.
Prior to 16th century. These Khalifatabad and Mahmudabad, all are these 16th, 17th, 18th centuries settlements belonging to that time Professor Eaton is referring to.
Yes. So not only urban centers, but even rural areas have settlements which are historically, testified, in terms of shrines and mosques, locality mosques. So how can you deny the existence of and not take cognizance of their presence in your rather, broad generalization? That book is very, very interesting. We are all fascinated in terms of, the closer look of the kind of architecture and the motives within that. Certainly, Bengal architecture is for Bengal. Bengal architecture is not for Makkah, Medina, and yet, the Qibla, the Kaaba is there. So your research is very, very interesting, and it is actually.
And we also, I think, Razi, we must also think about this notion of all the ideas coming from the West. Coming from the West to East. That is that was questioned for early medieval period by Professor Brajodulal Chattopadhyay. This Kendra Mukhi.
Yeah.
Kendra Mukhi, this idea that everything either coming from Middle East or from Delhi or from North India, there is one-way traffic.
Yes.
This might not be. The idea of frontier is also based on that notion.
Yes. Yeah.
It's coming from
Be-
outside.
Yeah, Bengal is important in itself. It's not frontier of anything, you know. Bengal is the center of the world in the 17th century, you know. I mean, and 18th century, you know this. The whole world is looking at Bengal in terms of the place to come to do business and also to settle down there. So very interesting indeed. If there are questions, I think. If there are questions, maybe if other people can ask.
There is no question on Facebook, but if anyone wants to ask from here, then you can ask.
Two of our colleagues, that is, I have mentioned, are present here also.
Here, yeah.
AKM Saifur Rahman and Afroza Khan Mita. And another two of our colleagues, Tuliguho Mojumdar and Sabikun Nahar, is also here. And one of our students who is now doing masters in under Erasmus Mundus is also here. So I am thanking all of them for being present in this webinar.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for taking us beyond the text, especially in terms of medieval art, by explaining
but not without the text.
No.
Not without the text.
No, not without the text.
Okay, exactly.
Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
In Bengali, I think dhonnobad.
Dhonnobad. Dhonnobad, shukriya, dutoi boli আমরা.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you again.
Thank you, sir.
Bye bye.